and I work within the conservation team at the MMO. The Marine Conservation Team has a variety of different work going on, but today I'm going to be primarily updating you with our work managing fishing in our offshore MPAs. I'll wait for the slide to change. There we go. So to start with, why manage fishing in MPAs? So as well as all the benefits you see there on the screen, MMO also have a domestic legal target to have all MPAs in favourable condition by 2024, the end of 2024, to contribute to the achievement of good environmental status under UK Marine Strategy, and importantly to achieve our 30 by 30 commitment to protect at least 30% of sea for nature by 2030. Oh, sorry, sea and land. The UK Fisheries Act 2020 gave MMO the powers to make bylaws to manage fishing for the purpose of conserving marine species and habitats. And as you can imagine, it's been quite a lot of work. So we have had it split down into 4 different stages. So this is a real brief breakdown of what each stage involves. So stage 1 is actually already in force. It came into force June 2022. Stage 2 is about to come into force. Stages 3 and 4 are well underway. The map on the right there illustrates all the different marine conservation areas within each different stage. Each MPA undergoes a site level assessment to determine if the fishing activity within that site is compatible with the conservation objectives of that site. We follow the format of a habitats regulation assessment or a marine conservation assessment. So if we conclude that ongoing fishing is hindering the conservation objectives of that site, we develop and implement an MMO bylaw to address the risk to that MPA. We work closely with SNCBs, so that's statutory nature conservation bodies like JNCC and Natural England, who advise us on the condition of the site. And we also work closely with IFCAs and other stakeholders to obtain the most current information and evidence. So I'm now just going to quickly run through each of the different stages. So as I said, stage 1 is already in force and protecting 13,500 kilometres squared of a variety of valuable marine habitats across 4 different sites. In fact, Dogger Bank is so big, it covers 12,000 square kilometres on its own and is around 5 times the size of the Lake District National Park, so it's absolutely huge. These sites were chosen as a representative spread of designations and features, including sensitive features which required urgent management. Currently, it's working really, really well. The compliance and enforcement team monitor the MPAs using surface and aerial surveillance. They monitor through VMS and catch records, and any person who is found guilty of contravening one of these MMO bylaws is liable to an unlimited fine. So moving on, stage 2, excitingly, is just about to come into force in a few days' time on the 22nd of March. So this is going to be protecting a further 4,000 kilometres squared of reef and rocky habitat across 13 MPAs, and it will be prohibiting the use of bottom-towed gears. So these features were chosen for the next stage of our assessment because, as you can see from these 3 photos alone, they host an abundant array of wildlife, enabling ecosystem functions. They provide important habitats, hard services for a variety of animals to attach to, including pink sea ferns and sponges, and they provide shelter for fish and crustacea. The habitats support the wider food chain and commercially important fish stocks, and bottom-towed gear has been shown through evidence to damage these habitats, causing fragmentation, reducing biodiversity and overall productivity of these habitats. Throughout the course of the bylaw making process, we have had a call for evidence. So we've reached out asking for any evidence people might have on the impacts of bottom-towed fishing gear on these reef features. We have engaged with stakeholders, partners and the fishing industry, and we've held a formal consultation, keeping everyone updated throughout this whole process. And as you can see, 6 of the 13 MPAs are situated in the southwest area, where it says the MMO portion. This is the portion outside of the 6 nautical mile limit. Inside the 6 nautical mile limit is IFCA jurisdiction. Where it says full site, this is a full site bottom-towed gear closure. And zone management is where the designated feature of circulittoral rock or reef is only in part of the MPA, and so we're closing that portion to bottom-towed gear. So stage 3 has been quite a lot of work undertaking roughly 43 site assessments. So these are assessments that have been covering all MPAs that were not considered in stages 1 and 2 in relation to bottom-towed gear. And then we've gone back and we've reassessed stages 2 and the remaining other MPAs as well in relation to traps and anchored nets and lines. So we had a call for evidence that ran from January to March this year, or last year, sorry, and have been collating and updating all of our impact evidence documents with the information we receive from this. And these are documents that are a full review of all the evidence available of the impacts of each gear type on each designated feature, and we use these to inform our site level assessments. We will go into formal consultation a little later in the year with all of these documents, and really appreciate everyone's feedback on it. And just to bring it back to the southwest, as you can see, out of those 43 sites, 20 of them sit in the southwest area. Stage 4, this has been a completely different kettle of fish. So stage 4 focuses on 5 MPAs that are designated for highly mobile marine species. So that's 3 sites for marine birds and 2 sites for the harbour porpoise. And as you can imagine, these sites have completely different considerations to the previous 3 stages, in that before we were looking at benthic features, so we're looking at pressures such as abrasion and smothering and siltation. But for these sites, we are looking at pressures such as bycatch, disturbance, above water and underwater noise, and prey availability. We ran a call for evidence earlier on this year, and the team are busy processing all that information and writing the site assessments and discussing management options with JNCC and Natural England and a whole range of other stakeholders. And finally, I just quickly wanted to talk to you all about our marine non-licensed sport activities. So as I previously said, MMO have obligations to ensure that our MPAs meet favourable condition targets. And MMO is responsible for managing impacts from non-licensed sport activities in MPAs between 0 and 12 nautical miles. So we work closely with Natural England, who are responsible for assessing the condition of the features of these MPAs. So marine non-licensed sport activities are activities such as kayaking, mooring, snorkeling, scuba diving, mostly recreational activities. And to make sure these activities aren't impacting the MPAs, we undertake site level assessments, assessing the impacts these activities may have on the designated features. And if it's found that one of these activities is actually impacting the site and is found to be making the site in unfavourable condition, further assessments of the site are needed and management may be required. Currently, we have 6 priority sites, and as you can see, 3 are in the southwest area. We know that stakeholders in the southwest are knowledgeable and passionate about their area, and in many cases already taking great strides to conserve and restore the environment, and we're really keen to work in partnership with stakeholders to explore options for management for marine non-licensed sport activities together. And that's everything from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cheryl. As I said, we'll do the Q&A at the end of a couple of presentations. So we'll go straight through to Jean-Luc with the MPA Reality Check update. You're muted, Jean-Luc.
Sorry, everybody. This is just a continuation of a presentation we've done in the last couple of years, showing the map of ongoing management measures, essentially fisheries management measures in the southwest. It does replicate what we just heard about from the MMO to a certain degree, but it also looks back in time at things like IFCA management as well, and ongoing activities in relation to habitat. And also it'll be framed in some degree of the ongoing discourse of things like whole site protection and protection of sediment veneer habitats. How that's being applied currently by the MMO is very interesting and quite progressive. I've done this work with my colleague Frisk Dunkley on the MPA Reality Check, and mostly Tom Moulier, who's been mapping all these activities on this website, which was after discussions with myself at the Wildlife Trust and Tom Hooper, who's speaking later about the need to show not only UK public what is progressing in MPAs, but also our European partners. And recently, very excitingly, we've also seen a layer going on it, which is imminent. And Daniel Clifford from the Wildlife Trust has been looking at favourable conservation status of sites and other activities, industrial activities at seas like wind farm and shipping channels, which should be put onto the website imminently. So why have we done this? Well, we did it because we have obviously these sorts of guides, which are very in-depth, which really are set to me at the individual practitioner level of describing how your MPA is doing. So we're going to hear a bit later about Lundy. This guide can be applied to management teams at places like Lundy. But we needed something, we felt in 2015, that really described what's happening with our legislated MPs, the tick there, the ongoing management planning in a certain degree, which is what we've heard about from the MMO and how that plays out, and the goals and objectives of those plans. And these are all elements of that report. But regulated use, that's another factor that we wanted to see added to this sort of guideline. And that's within this MPA Reality Check for fisheries management measures. So what does it look like? It's a website that you can all use. It's got clickable layers. You can click on the individual polygons of the MPAs. You can look at UNIS level 3, very coarse level habitat data. Pink is reef, yellow is sand, orange or yellowy orange is mixed substrate, and mud is brown. So it's quite intuitive, we think. It also has a layer of fishing effort by bottom-towed fishing gears. It is principally focused, as I must say, on the benthic habitat maps and the benthic MPAs. Why? Because bottom trawling is probably the one factor that we need to see managed, which is fundamental to biodiversity, ecosystem services, and securing benthic carbon. I don't mean carbon just in the sediments, but I also mean the living matter on the seabed, which in itself and of itself is carbon. And often that is forgotten in the scientific discourse about how important the seabed is to carbon capture. Now, we have also these elements within the reality check, and here I've just done some screen grabs from the statistics page of the website, describing how we're doing over time in terms of MPAs and their bylaws. Now, for all of the IFCAs around England, their MPA coverage is about 14,500 square kilometres, of which 4,600 kilometres squared is close to bottom-towed fishing gear. And this has gone up by about 1% in area coverage because of the Beachy Head East MCZ management measure that came into effect last year. So this is an update since last year. In terms of Cornwall, Devon and the Isles of Scilly, which have rather small MPA areas, the jurisdiction is in grey. The MPAs are the yellow, green and blue layers. Now there in Cornwall, we can see there's just under 50% of MPAs protected in the area coverage. Devon and Severn, it's much higher than that. It's about 81%. And in the Scillies, it's 75% that is covered by MPA bylaws that protect the sites from bottom-towed fishing gear. Now, how does that look in terms of broad-scale habitats? Well, in terms of Devon and Severn area, we see similar percentages of all habitats that are considered for closures. Now, in the first part of the revised approach, which meant that regulators had to start dealing with these issues of bottom-towed fishing gear or benthic habitats, from about 2013 to about 2015, reef had to be protected as well as merle and seagrass. So that was dealt with initially. Now, what's been really quite encouraging with places like Devon is they've got a lot of mixed reef sediment communities that have been enhanced and protected in their entirety through bylaws. Places like the start point to Eddystone Reef MPA have seen large areas protected beyond reefs. So it's been quite progressive to see what's happened in Devon, which allows us as both the scientific community and practitioners to understand what happens when you protect the entirety of ecosystems. In Cornwall, the picture is probably less comprehensive in terms of area covered. That's largely because the North Coast MPAs that are in the catchment of Cornwall haven't seen regulation because there is a consideration that the areas are far too dangerous to trawl through because of current and tide. Nevertheless, I think there is a move, particularly the local Cornwall Council and its local nature recovery partnership, and myself and others would like to see some measures put in place in North Cornwall, just in case gears are modified to be able to trawl through the inshore closed areas. In the Scillies, the picture is more comprehensive. I think we're going to hear a lot more about this from Tom Hooper later, so I won't go into great detail about that. But since this bylaw is put in place, there's another one on the table with the Secretary of State at the moment. Now, the offshore sites is where I want to go and just sort of double down on what Cheryl said, because it's very exciting what's happening at the moment, particularly in the current phase. I urge you all to, if you've got any evidence on trawling on sedimentary habitats, do get in touch with the MMO, because in the southwest there's been considerable elements of closures. The closures were reviewed, as Cheryl said, last year, and the closures are coming in 3 days in the southwest over 6 sites. Now, how does the whole process look? Now, the green areas that are just put in here were the stage 1 bylaws that were completed in 2022. All the other areas that I'm going to use my mouse here, the Hague Frass area is entirely closed. That lies within an MCZ. Don't think that that's a partial closure. This MCZ, that is the blue area, will be in stage 3 consultation, which is being reviewed now, as are the other sites that was described earlier by Cheryl that are in blue. This site east of Hague Frass is quite exciting because it's closed in its entirety, even though the reef was just a mosaic within it rather than just completely reef habitat. You can see a much smaller area of reef in this site, which is south of Celtic Deep, I think. So that is yet to be investigated for stage 3. That will have probably a further measure to protect the outer area. Cape Bank was the other significant closure. And here the MO had jurisdiction over the outer edge of this Tintagel Bay site. So the IFCA, I think, is probably bound to protect its inner area of the site. Well, I would hope so in the future. So stage 3 is really, really quite exciting. Here's where we can see the benthic habitats in slightly higher resolution. I described Hague Frass. Even the entirety of the site was closed. Most of the fishing activity was actually in the channel between the 2 reef promontories. It's not too much deeper in this area here, but there was definitely more intense fishing activity that went between the reef areas. A, so that gear wasn't damaged, and B, probably because there were more fish to be caught in that area. This area here, which has very small patchy reef habitat, is enclosed in its entirety, called east of Hague Frass, and that had significant intervention in the consultation response from the French fishing industry that wanted to see it remain open. So that's quite exciting, that an area that was hitherto quite intensively fished, well, relatively heavily fished, has been closed. So quite extensive and quite exciting proposals, a hint of what might come in stage 3. So here's the comprehensive data of the entire area. Southwest waters are enormous in the entire area of this polygon here, 92,000 square kilometers, of which stage 3 is the real exciting area to play for. Over 13,000 areas of kilometers squared of MPAs to play for. In stage 2, you can see it was only 2,521 areas of the MPA. So a much smaller area of reef relative to sand. Now, if we look at the perspective of how things have gone so far, we can see this entire area has been closed to bottom towed fishing gear. Why? Nothing to do with bylaws, because it is below 800 meters, of which there is a general ban throughout EU waters to ban trawling. So that closed automatically 7% of the waters. Stage 1, 2022, 0.8% of the waters were closed, just this small site, the canyons, and here in East Dorset or South Dorset. Stage 2, over 2,000 square kilometers closed in the network. But adding them together, it's only a small proportion of the entire estate. But if you see, this is what would happen if stage 3 were closed in its entirety. We bumped the percentage up tremendously. So there's a lot to play for this year. And this is the footprint from the MPA Reality Check showing the bottom trawling extent in Southwest waters. So really quite exciting what we might do about things like spillover effect if we actually get the closures necessary to make these MPAs worth the name Marine Protected Area. So exciting times ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean-Luc. That was great. I will give you a little presentation now as well, and is an update from the Wildlife Trust about our campaigns for the general election. So let me just share my screen.
a bit of PowerPoint.
Sorry, I'm just
So-
finding my screen. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've called my presentation Seize the Moment, a call to action for protecting our seas. And that is because the general elections are coming up and the Wildlife Trust international team, but also as a regional level, are working for nature and climate to be high on every candidate's agenda so that the elected representatives will act for nature recovery. So one of the targets that the UK government agreed to is 30 by 30, and that is conserving and protecting 30% of land and sea by 2030. But 2030 is getting closer, but we're still quite distant from achieving this goal. And we don't want this to just be a meaningless counting exercise, just ticking a box, but an actual commitment to nature conservation, and in this case, marine conservation. And also there is still the other 70% of seas that we don't want to forget about. So we think that a well-managed network of marine protected areas is critical to a healthy marine environment. But the question is, are our current MPAs really conserving and protecting our seas and really delivering this 30 by 30? There is still quite a lot of work to be done, we believe, and these are some of the key points that we will be advocating for regionally and nationally. So we are calling for an ecosystem-based approach to MPA management. Currently, our MPAs are mainly feature-based, so activities within the MPAs are managed to protect specific features within it. And instead, we want to see MPAs protected from all damaging activities across their whole sites. And that includes unsustainable fishing, as well as offshore wind farm arrays. And this is because marine species and habitats are interconnected. So it is not really possible for one to be protected and recover without the other species and their habitats being looked after too. And you can see on Jean-Luc's MPA Reality Check that management measures within MPAs can be disconnected, and there is also a lot of zonation in terms of fishery bylaws. And this is not very effective as it doesn't account for changes in species distribution and especially mobile species, but also changes in habitats, as this zonation does rely on the accuracy of feature maps too. And having all of these bylaw shapes and cutouts can also make monitoring and reporting quite difficult, as it can be quite unclear where a ban starts and where it ends at sea. And it's also harder for the fishing industry to understand and follow properly. So it would be beneficial to have a whole site approach to conserving habitats and species within the MPAs. And talking about whole site approaches, we also calling for a ban on bottom-towed gear in all marine protected areas. We know that bottom-towed gear is one of the most damaging types of fishing, but despite that, it is still permitted in quite a few MPAs, whether it's in the whole of the MPA or just in certain areas. And because of the feature-based approach, bottom-towed gear is mainly restricted on areas with rocky, hard substrates and leaves out soft sediments. Despite these also have high biodiversity and are important for carbon storage, for example, and bottom-towed gear has very damaging effects on that too. We do have a lot of data gaps in marine, we all know that, but the one thing that we have enough evidence on is that bottom-towed gear really damages marine habitats and species. And we are at the point where we must apply the precautionary principle and implement these management measures to protect our seas. And then this can be adapted as more scientific evidence becomes available. Another thing we're calling for is a MPA recovery plan. So as Jean-Luc mentioned, the Wildlife Trust have recently carried out a review of all MPAs in the UK, and they sorted it. They sorted each of the MPA into a recovery category, so recovered/recovering, degraded or degrading, and unknown. And this is based on a peer-reviewed methodology and the best available feature condition assessments from the statutory nature conservation bodies. You will see all the outputs from this project soon on the MPA Reality Check, but one of the outcomes is that only 15.27% of MPAs in England and 28.88% of MPAs across the UK are in favourable condition. And this is a very low number and shows how we are far from effective management, and we need to determine what is preventing MPAs from recovering, and we need to see an action plan to bring these back in good condition. And while we get all this data and evidence, it is important, as I said before, that we adopt the precautionary principle in the meantime. And then finally, we're also calling for more highly protected marine areas and no-take zones to be established. So we are really happy to see that 3 new HPMAs have been established in 2023, but this shouldn't be seen as an end goal, but the start of a series of HPMAs being rolled out around the country. For example, we had proposed different HPMAs in the Southwest, but none have been approved. So we do need more pilot HPMAs and no-take zone sites to determine the effectiveness of these measures, and also find out what the marine environment could look like if left alone, and what those effects would be both environmentally and economically. There are already some studies showing the positive effects of higher level of protections, such as Landy, that Robert will be talking about later, so I won't expand on this. But that shows that it has positive effects both for the marine environment and the fishing industry too, especially when done in collaboration. So this was a very quick run through our key asks in terms of MPAs. And if you would like to know more about this, but also support what I've talked about, you can take a few actions, like going on Cornwall Wildlife Trust website and sign the open letter for nature. And also sign up to Devon Wildlife Trust newsletter to receive updates on hustings, and anything concerning the general elections. And there's also more information on the National Wildlife Trust website. Thank you very much. I'll stop sharing the screen. I also have a very quick update from Natural England. So they couldn't be here today, but they kindly provided us with a bit of an update. So I'm just going to read it out for you. So Natural England are in the process of delivering their programme to complete and update marine condition assessments across all of England's marine protected areas. This year, the Devon, Cornwall and Isle of Scilly team have undertaken condition assessments for features of the Axe Estuary Marine Conservation Zone, Whitford to Foreland Point MCZ, the Manacles MCZ and Tema Estuary Sites MCZ. And these assessments will provide important insights into the condition of designated features, informing whether the conservation objectives are being achieved, and identifying any additional monitoring and management measures that may be necessary. This work will also underpin Natural England's advice to marine regulators and fisheries managers to achieve a well-managed MPA network and facilitate the identification of priorities for nature recovery. It will also contribute to assessing the progress towards the Environment Improvement Plan 2023 and the Environmental Targets Regulations 2023. This last one includes a specific target stipulating that 70% of all MPA protected features should be in favourable condition by the end of 2042, with an interim target of 48% of MPA features to be achieved by 2028. The target also requires that all other protected features should be at a minimum in a recovering condition. So of the 51 marine protected areas, 47 have formal conservation advice packages, which have been published. The remaining 4 packages will be drafted through collaborative efforts between Natural England and JNCC in the near future. So they also provided links to where to find these marine conservation advice packages and condition assessments. The condition assessments completed in 2023, 2024 will be published on designated sites view and available to view from the end of March. So I will put these links in the chat during the break so you can all access them. And we are finished with the first few presentations, and we'll go to questions. Let me check this out. Okay, well, Jean-Luc, I see there's one from you. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask it?
Yeah, sure. Hi, it's for Cheryl. Thanks for the presentation. I just wondered whether when the stage 3 bylaw consultation is going to come out, because we need to plan our time to respond to that. And you mentioned unrestricted fines are available to prosecutors about transgressions in the MPAs, but I wonder what would be the process by which you do a fine against an overseas vessel fishing in a UK MPA?
Thank you. So I think formal consultation is hopefully going out in like a month or two, I think it is. It's not too far away now. And as for the unrestricted fines, so our compliance and enforcement team have a strategy that they have to follow, which I actually think, I'm just trying to find a link to it. I think it is online, the process of the fines. I can put the link in the chat for you. Yeah, I'll find the link and I'll get back to you on that one about the enforcement.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see there's a question from Keith as well. Keith, would you like me to read it out, or would you like to just unmute yourself and ask it? Okay, I'll just read it out. So, Carly and all, you mentioned interconnectedness of habitats and species in MPAs a concern that is very terrestrial concern, and marine is very well connected without I can't really read that, or a scientific minimum distance between MCZs. Would anyone like to provide evidence for a need to consider connectivity in management or site selection plans? I'll post it in the chat. I think it was just sent to me.
I mean, I can have a go. I think connectivity is really fundamental to MPA management, and that's why we've been, banging on about the whole site approach, not being just about HPMAs, but being about managing bottom-towed fishing gear with the entirety of sites, because species will have different life history stages at different parts of habitats. So cod move between seagrass beds and mud and deeper waters over their life cycle. So in the ontogeny of species, in the growth and movement of species, and they rely on the benthos. So having one area of the habitat protected like seagrass bed and not the adjacent muddy or reef ground is stupid for the continuation of the health of that species. Similarly, other organisms like crab and lobster, I think crab do an annual migration into deeper waters. So not taking into account those migrations of species on a seasonal basis or through their life history is tantamount to not protecting typical features of sites, which is a legal objective, at least in the Habitats Directive.
Thank you, Jean-Luc. Keith says, I'm listening to unscientific nonsense. I would welcome evidence.
I think I just mentioned 2 species that move. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jean-Luc. We have Barnaby asking if could rewilding be permitted within MPAs? Seaweed seeded biodegradable ropes or pebbles, for instance. is that about non-licensable activities? Cheryl, would you like to try and pick up that?
Sorry, I didn't catch that. Could you repeat that for me? I can't see it in the chat.
So could rewilding be permitted within MPAs? Seaweed, seeded biodegradable ropes or pebbles, for instance?
It's a really good question. A really good question. It doesn't, I don't think it falls under a marine non-licensable activity. I think something like that might fall under a licensable activity, but I can double check and then get back to you. But that is definitely something to consider, I think.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. We have a question from Matt. So surely sediments need protection from bottom-towed gear more than reefs, as reefs are avoided for safety reasons by mobile fishing gear. Sediments in the Celtic Sea are important spawning grounds and deserve protection. Jean-Luc, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what is going to be critical about this year. Does the MMO feel confident enough to provide comprehensive management measures for their offshore MPAs for exactly those sorts of processes, as opposed to just benthic organisms that might attach themselves to the seabed? What about the processes of egg laying, for example, or herring populations? So you know, can we actually say we have a functioning network of MPAs that allows species to persist as they're in their normal life cycle? So it's a very good point.
Thank you. I'm going to pick up the question from Claire. How are the MMO accounting for impacts on fish and shellfish population from the construction impacts of offshore wind farms, and how this could affect conservation objectives? For example, at Dogger Bank and other MPAs where wind farms are planned.
Thanks. So basically all marine licensable activities, including wind farms and things, are subject to an in-depth technical assessment to their impacts on the relevant MPAs. So MMO does not allow activities to undermine conservation objectives of an MPA. Only exception to this is where there is imperative reasons of overriding public interest, which is known as IROPI, where the benefits of the act to the public clearly outweighs the risk of the damage to the environment. Typically, this applies only for nationally significant infrastructure projects or NSIPs, so most like wind farms and things. In these cases, the developer must put compensatory measures in place to bring about an environmental benefit to at least equivalent of any damage taking place within the site.
Okay, great. Thanks, Cheryl. And I can see that Jean-Luc has been answering on the chat as well. We're going to stop here for questions and have a 5-minute break. I can see for the questions that I'm getting some through just direct message to me rather than the chat. So if you ask a question, make sure that they direct it to everyone so the speakers can see it too. But yeah, let's have a couple of minute break and we'll come back 10:50. Thank you. Okay, I think we will start again. I sorted out my chat a bit better. Before it was very small and I was struggling to read the questions, so sorry if that was a bit chaotic. But we're going to start with Chloe with lessons from Lyme Bay to inform policy, management and monitoring of marine protected areas. Floor is yours.
Awesome. Ooh. Can everyone see that okay? Is that okay? Cool. Okay, so yeah, today I'm going to be talking about our recent review paper, which brings together over a decade of research from Dr. Emma Sheehan and Dr. Sian Rees and their teams. And also I'm going to talk a bit about the key partnerships and how they were formed. So this is the paper and I'll link to it at the end. And just a quick thanks to all of our funders. So I'm sure you're all familiar with Lyme Bay, but it's an area of high conservation importance. It's home to beautiful marine biodiversity of endangered pink sea fans, but it's also an area of really important fishing activity. And in the past, this fishing activity has been unregulated, and in particular, bottom-towed gear has caused some concerns over the intense damage that it caused to these rocky reefs. So this eventually led to firstly voluntary closures, which are shown in the grey polygons, and then in 2008 a statutory instrument was brought in to close a 206 kilometre squared area of the seabed to bottom-towed fishing, and this was protected through a whole site approach, meaning that all of the habitats in that area are protected from towed fishing gear. And then in 2011, an additional overlapping special area of conservation was introduced, and that's shown by the green dotted line on the map. And that protected just the reef habitats through a feature-based protection approach. So successfully managing and monitoring this MPA has required a lot of effort from the local community and NGOs. And so Blue Marine Foundation have been really integral in forming these key partnerships. So they formed the Lyme Bay Working Group in 2011, which, amongst other things, it established regular in-person meetings with fishermen, and also it helped to make static gear fishing economically viable by providing things like ice machines and a designated ban, and that allowed static caught fish inside the MPA to reach market in prime condition. So the partnership building wasn't always straightforward. There were some mistakes made, but they learned a lot from the process. So in particular, it emphasised the importance of having early and regular engagement with the fishing community to develop those crucial relationships, and also listening to the fishing community and respecting the wealth of knowledge that they have for the local area. So yeah, that's been really important for the ecological monitoring. And then in terms of socioeconomics, it's well known that the ecological outcomes of MPAs are linked to human factors such as the support and buy-in for MPAs. But until recently, there was limited empirical evidence of socioeconomic outcomes. So Sian Rees and her team developed a standardized socioeconomic evaluation framework. And this included questionnaires to understand the value to the local community, and also understand changes in subjective well-being and measure fishery impacts. So in terms of fishery impacts, the impacts were more positive for static gear fishermen, who increased the use of the MPA and the areas around it. And interestingly, whilst there was a reduction in the static landings weight, there was actually an increase in the value of those landings, and this was due to an increase in sort of high value species like lobster, which were using the reef habitats. But unfortunately for the mobile gear fishermen, there was a displacement. But outside the MPA, the mobile fishing landings were comparable before and after the MPA was designated. So in terms of the wellbeing impacts, again, static gear fishermen were more positively impacted. So as you can see in the black column, mobile fishermen did have a reduction in job satisfaction and perceived stress. But in terms of static gear fishermen, the involvement in the working group really positively impacted them. So they had an increase in job satisfaction and a reduction in stress. And this just highlights the importance of community engagement for really maximising the benefits of MPAs for local fishermen. And then the other side of the story can be told through the ecological survey. So Emma Sheehan and her team created the Towed Underwater video, which it obtains like a standardized video transect of the seafloor, and this allows you to measure ecosystem level recovery by quantifying species at all levels of the food web, but it's not as effective at measuring mobile species, so we also use baited remote video surveys. And together, these methods are deployed at sites inside and outside the MPA every summer. So what was really exciting was that there was definitive signs of ecological recovery within the first 3 years. And this was seen for the number of species in the MPA, for 2 of the 9 sessile indicator species and 1 of 4 mobile indicator species. And then in terms of longer term benthic recovery, Davies and others looked at recovery from 2008 and 2019. And again, they found that the MPA, both the SAC and the statutory MPA, were more diverse than the control sites that were open to trawling. But what was really interesting was that there was a 95% increase in total abundance in the whole site MPA, and just a 15% increase in the special area conservation, which was feature-based. So this was evidence for the importance of the whole site approach. And then in terms of the mobile species recovery, again, there was an increase in the number of all mobile species, but an interesting finding was that for commercial fish species that remained, were still fished by static gears, there was really big increases in taxon richness and total abundance. And there was also some evidence of a spillover effect by increases in the open control sites. So some additional benefits that we've got from the ecological monitoring. There was evidence from evidence of climate resilience in terms of recovery after extreme storm damage. The information has been used to evidence a paradigm shift towards the whole site approach, as a lot of people have already mentioned today. And also the ecological methods have been used to identify a sustainable potting threshold, and that study was co-produced with local fishermen. So yeah, just to conclude, the research in MPAs helped contribute to the whole site approach. It's demonstrated the importance of combining social and ecological goals. It shows the importance of long-term monitoring for understanding recovery rates and the importance of engaging with the local community. Sorry, that was a really quick whistle-stop tour, but here is the paper for anyone who'd like to read it.
Oh, thank you very much, Chloe. And thanks very much for sticking to time. That was my fault. You had to go that fast. Thanks. So next we have Tom with a fine line, decisions for MPA management in the Isle of Scilly.
I'm just loading up now. Hi, good morning. This talk is really illustrating a process which we've undergone over the last 5 years, illustrating the kind of ebb and flow of decisions and how different factors influence the outcome. Just to orientate you, in case you don't know, here we are in the far southwest, the very southwest tip of Cornwall, 28 miles off the coast there. So this map illustrates the fact that we have multiple designations. I used to say we were the only one with 4 overlapping designations. I think Plymouth, maybe there are others, but it creates a unique complexity. And you know, there's a sort of the original SPA in 1997 to protect the seabird assemblage. and that's underpinned, if you can see the small red dots around the islands, which are the nesting sites. And then the SPA was increased in 2019, 2020, so to protect the foraging grounds, which was the kind of logical next step. The big yellow box is the special area of conservation, and then the 2013 amber sites are the marine conservation zones. It's complicated, and it means that, you know, to explain to people what feature is protected from which human activity using which mechanism is not an easy one to answer, and it creates this sense of, you know, there's lots of different organizations and data involved in this process. And so just to be clear, us as the IFCA in this kind of regulatory puzzle, we look after the impact of fishing, it's both primarily commercial but recreational too, in the context of the whole district, but very particularly within the MPAs which have been designated. And it's, you know, we as an IFCA, we have a committee, and we're set up under the Marine Coastal Access Act with a responsibility, overarching responsibility, to balance social, economic and environmental. And that's which is often a real challenge in terms of different people's worldview. What's more important? What's the, you know, what are you protecting? And in 2019, we started a process to review an existing bylaw. Obviously, a lot of the bylaws went through in 2013 under the revised approach to protect particular habitats. And there was this, you know, this after we were required to re-examine these every 5 years or so. So we set up these overarching aims of the bylaw. And we wanted to maintain the quality of the marine environment. We wanted to make sure there were still economic benefits. And there was a case, and there was certain interest in making sure there was a toad gear fishery. At the time, there was one operating an otter trawl, and that stopped in 2019. But still, there was a case to be made for having a sustainable toad gear fishery, and make sure there was greater clarity in the bylaws. So again, we, you know, the same names keep coming up, Sian Rees and Emma Sheehan. The first part of it was really to look at the habitats, and this, you know, any modelled habitat has is modelled, and it has areas which are not what they say they are in the model, and this turned out to be the case. So you can see here these two corners. If I can use these two corners in the 2013 bylaw had an agreement with the otter trawl that I've just lost my screen. Excuse me. I've just so there was an agreement that the one otter trawl could use these bits here, but that when we did this research using the toad video, what we saw was what was modelled as sediment habitat was actually a veneer of rock with the reef features growing through it, and obviously that has a greater degree of sensitivity to bottom trawled gear. And so we really concentrated effort around this east and southeast area here, which really changed that paradigm in terms of what we thought should be, how fishing activities should be managed in this area. So this illustrates the where fishing activity takes place. This is a trawl track of that the otter trawl, really showing data between around 2012 to 2019. And then there's kind of relative pressure from the static gear. It's much less than you'd find anywhere on the mainland, but it still exists as a slight pressure. And this dotted line here shows the area where there was interest in scallop dredging to take place in the future. So when the sensitivity maps were drawn out, this is the sensitivity to penetration, habitat structure change. you can see that obviously this is going to be incompatible both within the boundary of the SAC and outside it. And this really changed the nature of the discussions. But the other key element really in this was work done by Sian Rees and Matt Ashley to undertake an ecosystem service asset and risk register. And this is broadly what the output looks like, showing these 5 ecosystem service and assets from climate regulation, food, coastal protection and recreation. And this is what would be as the current was showing green and amber, showing a very low or medium level of potential impact. Whereas if we were to introduce a greater amount of trawling, there would be a greater amount of impact on these key habitats here. Now, the use of ecosystem service and that whole language and culture was really useful to this process, because it meant people weren't talking directly about economic benefit or economic loss. It was really around the ability of the different habitats to provide those services. So it neutralized a lot of that discussion, the real polarity of discussion. So in talking with fishermen, both on Scilly, who are predominantly static gear fishermen, and on the mainland, who were predominantly interested in the options for towed gear, we were able to use that and I had people in meetings talking about, well, this is going to have a sort of decrease in the ecosystem benefits of this habitat or that habitat, which was really nice to hear. But it is a difficult thing to get your head around. But the other thing we used in this process was this scenario where very broadly we tested the ecosystem services if we were to have an increase in otter trawling or an increase in scallop dredging, and that really showed how in some cases the assets would decrease in different kind of scenarios. Again, that was really useful. Unfortunately, we could only have 3 static scenarios. I'd love to have a situation where we could try one thing and then try another thing in a kind of iterative process. But we had to, because of the nature of the tool, we had to just do it in those 3 basic scenarios. So as we're getting into the kind of decision-making context, this was the first kind of polygon that I drew really roughly for the meeting to sort of say, well, look, we need to bust the boundaries of the SAC. But maybe there's something in the top left corner there that we could allow to be open to trawling. But in the end, the trawling proposed trawling restriction was this slightly larger area here, and it was absolutely following the lines there of highest potential impact. The red risk there. And this is not what we thought was sediment, is actually areas of reef with reef features coming through that. And this is the Bristow's to Stones MCZ, the Stones reef here and the Bristow's reef here. So what it actually does is goes beyond, and this really updates Jean-Luc's presentation from this morning. So it goes to about 47% of our district, which will be restricted to trawling. With this area here, which will remain open to trawling, and there's a plan and a project here through a PhD, which will very carefully monitor impact and change in that site there over the next few years. So this is the final prohibited area. I think it represents a really good use of science. It represents that real toing and froing of different decisions and different viewpoints. But I think really comes down to understanding the science and having a better knowledge of what's there and how we can manage activity quite carefully and quite cleverly, I think, to make sure there's a trade-off between static gear and trawling in those activities around Scilly. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, so now we are going to Robert with all on board the importance of local buy-in to maintaining the relevance of MPAs. That's about Langley.
Right, I hope everybody can hear me. I'll just try and get my display up. It should be coming up here. Right. Well, good morning, everybody. I hope you can all hear me. I was having trouble with my internet connection earlier, so I apologize if this might come through without the audio being perfect. However, I hope it won't be the case. I'm going to talk a bit about the importance of getting local buy-in to MPAs and using Lundy as an example.
Robert, we can't see the screen if you've shared it. At least I can't see it.
Oh, sorry, Carly, can you say that again? You can't see my screen?
No.
Oh, right, okay. Let me try again. Oh. Let me just see if I've come out of the, I think I've come out of the meeting accidentally. Not doing that. Sorry, I'm not quite sure what I've managed to do that's not now working.
Helps. And it doesn't work, you can send the presentation to me and maybe someone from the
let me
next
just,
session.
well, I tell you what, Carly, are you happy to go on to the next speaker and then I'll carry on trying to sort this out and then come back? Is that possible?
Yes. Yes. Well, I could have Jean-Luc, would you be able to do your next presentation?
Yep, I can
Yeah.
muscle in.
Thank you.
That's probably the wrong term. Okay, my screen. Everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to bring up a story which goes back to the whole site approach discussion. I don't think this has been presented yet at Southwest Marine Ecosystems. We did a study with University of Exeter and with Cornwall IFCA to understand the distribution of species on sediments in an area that was ostensibly closed to bottom toad fishing gear for reef features. So that's what this story is about. Obviously, we're having this debate at the moment about a lot of the UK marine habitat is really sand and mixed sediment communities. So even though we have done a lot of good protection, we heard about the MMO protecting reefs. We know that the revised approach initially protected reefs, but sediment is really a large part of the benthos of the UK marine environment. So do we need to see some recoverability of that habitat given the extent of bottom trawling that has occurred on our sediment grounds? There are tantalizing glimpses of this through some of the lines in the sand publications that Emma's put together, and some of the recovery we've seen in places like Start Point, where bottom toad fishing gear has been banned on both sediment veneer habitats and also rich sediment and cobble ground. So I think there was some opportunity from the revised approach in 2011 to 2015, 16 and beyond to really change it. And there is a paper that describes this change in culture of fishing and managing sites that we contributed to with Client Earth in about a decade ago. Now, the result of the initial bylaws was, as I said, to close reefs and then merle and seagrass within sandbank parts of sites. Tom Hooper described beautifully how the evolution of an initial somewhat clumsy and rushed approach, maybe, with the lack of survey of habitat, meant that the some places like Scilly's closed perhaps a precautionary area of seabed. But now I think the revised approach stimulated the ability for science and for regulators to get together to say what they needed to do in future to improve habitat condition. And now we're getting to the really exciting point of evolution of conservation and talking about ecosystem services, which is wise, and how we should evolve MPAs as the initiators of regulation into a wider discourse about what damages the ocean's functionality and how it functions as an ecosystem. So I'm going to talk about the Eddystone, which is part of the Plymouth Sound to Eddystone and Start Point MPA. Some of the lines in the SAM work looks at these sediment veneers. Nick Owen did provide a presentation. Emma Sheehan's provided her excellent papers and work on what's happened at Lyme Bay, but Lyme Bay is just one site. We pulled together some of the Lyme Bay work with some of the stuff that was done in Scotland with Bruff's work at the time, to describe how fish of 3 different gadoids use different habitats of our MPA, which is a much bigger MPA than the average size of inshore MPAs, that describe this matrix process of use. And we all know about the veneer habitat use for things like these Ross corals and those wonderful 30-meter plus deep assemblages we get on these reefs. And these sponges that are growing through sediment veneers can also be added to by other sponges that are actually on mobile coarse sand, like Heliclona and Aegeus fascicularis. So there are observations of pure sediment habitat organisms that maybe some of the literature doesn't describe. And of course, there are all these other assemblages which can just grow on sand and the soft benthos without any necessary large stones or cobbles or pebbles to occur. So there is value in recreating the conditions, which is obviously an absence of bottom trawling, to allow those species to persist. Now, where we saw this revised approach playing out in the Eddystone was to protect the reef habitats, of which are the red zones are here. Now, a lot of you will know about the hands deep and Eddystone rocks, not least Keith. And what the IFCA originally did when it was, it had just been turned into an IFCA, was protect the reefs, but it produced a buffer zone of around 200 meters around the reef features, allowing an area of sediment to be protected, particularly in the area of hand deep here, that we could then study. And we collaborated with the University of Exeter, Matt Witt and colleagues. Steve Pikesley was fundamental in doing the analysis. The IFCA went out on Tiger Lily, a fantastic survey platform to drop cameras. They used a Sea Spider camera, which had incredibly high resolution. They had GoPros on it, so it could be dropped down. The GoPro could see where the camera was, and an image was taken, which had extraordinary resolution. Subsequent analysis occurred at the University of Exeter. Here's a schematic of what the project looked like, which was run from 2014 to 2021. The drop-down cameras around 50 meters deep were in depths much deeper than what we could put our sea search divers safely in. So it had to be done with drop-down camera work. We put a treatment area in the sediment grounds in the buffer zone where we saw there was going to be no trawling. And then in a near control and a far control to estimate whether there was going to be a difference in sediment. We controlled for depth and aspect. So the near control and far control had reefs on the west and southern side, and also had a large amount of sediment and rock habitat. And all depths were at 50 meters. So we tried to control for that sort of variable. This is box 1. Which is typical of all the boxes, what it looked like with the camera toes. Now, you can't control where the camera toe goes on from year to year. You just have to let it go, and you control for the habitat. Side-scan sonar was used in the areas in Hatch to describe reef habitat, and we analysed essentially what was occurring in the sediment habitat in the 3 boxes. So this is the treatment box 1 within the controlled zone. So this is where we knew the bottom-toed fishing gear was managed. We can assess the fauna in all these plots. As you can see in the white plots, they are areas of sediment veneers, but we really were interested in taking the conservation step one step further, just to look at pure sediment habitat and see what benthos, what organisms lived on the benthos in those habitats. This is a slightly complicated slide. Let's go from left to right. Box 1 illustrates 4 different types of fauna: anemones, buried or tube anemones, and where they were found within the areas of sediments and on the reefs. The reefs are bounded by the red lines. So in box 1, you can see a lot of anemones still on the sediment grounds in the controlled zone where no trawling occurred. Lots of cut corals. Dead men fingers actually distributed in the rich sediment grounds, and sponges. Whereas in the 2 open boxes, if you recall, box 2 being near control, box 3 being far control, there were a lot less fauna of those different types of organisms. Box 3, much more convoluted habitat, but you can see really constrained locations of parts of those habitats. And then we wanted to look at the distance from the reefs to the actual record of those individual fauna. And you could see that the distance from the reefs, which is how vertical, how high up the bars are, was quite considerable in box 1 for anemones. In box 2, there were also some quite considerable distributions of anemones away from the reefs, probably this particular figures here and here. But particularly when you got down to the more, shall we say, longer lived species like dead men's fingers and sponges, you definitely saw a greater distribution in the entire area of the closed area of sponges and dead men's finger corals in box 1, the closed area, compared to the box 2 and 3, where bottom-toed fishing gear was relatively common. So we did see an effect of the management of the site on the distribution and density of these vulnerable upright fauna on sediment. This is what some of those fauna look like. So we published this in a couple of papers, one describing the actual collaboration as a good cooperative governance approach to managing marine protected areas, and a second paper describing the biological responses of the communities. And then, as we've all discussed before, and it's becoming a bit of a non-stop narrative, this narrative has gone into this description of whole site approach, because as we've seen from the maps, the sediment areas between those reefs are not closed to bottom-toed fishing gear, but they do have species of biological value in them. And this narrative has been played out in Dogger Bank, where as Cheryl said earlier, over 12,300 kilometers squared of ground has been closed to bottom-toed fishing gear in what is almost completely sedimentary habitat. The reduction in the fishing effort is here evinced by the blue dots, and there has been a subsequent increase in fishing effort in the red dot areas since the closure. So there has been a fundamental shift in the amount of fishing that has taken place in this huge MPA, and it would be wonderful to see more science thrown at Dogger Bank to see if that's going to have a long-term effect. And then I described earlier what's happened with sites like the east of Hague Frass, another tantalizing glimpse of when the whole site approach is applied. So lessons learned from the study: high-res camera stills pick up very small things. I think as a difference to the technique that's been used at Plymouth over their toad array, we could really pick up fauna which is absolutely minute to describe in much more detail in an admittedly smaller area what really is going on in the sediment. Sediment habitats away from dredging and trawling support more corals and sponges. The UK government appears to be taking notice in management decisions on sandbanks and mixed reef mosaics about the whole site approach that comes from these sorts of studies. And the exciting thing is about MPA management from 2024 onwards. Can we protect over 50% of Southwest MPA ecosystems or more from bottom-toed fishing gear? Going into this narrative, MPAs and protection of the ecosystem is not just about reefs, marlins, seagrasses, it is also about the sandier habitats. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Jean-Luc. That was very interesting. We do have a couple of questions in the chat. One of them is from Ed. Ed, do you want to speak up and ask it yourself?
Yeah, I hope you can hear me. I won't turn my camera on because my internet will crash. But it was just following on from conversations that have gone on before from Jean-Luc, and then mentioning Sean's work around the sort of abrasion and the likes, bottom-toe gears, to look at can we look at where life cycles of different species, you might find those species associated. So we tend to close areas because of habitat, but if you were to look at, let's say, movement of crustaceans across the seafloor, or movement of cuttlefish, or movement of cod, or whichever species you want to look at, could you identify a whole selection of features or areas across the seafloor that, across an area, let's say the Isles of Scilly, which are associated with that, and therefore you can understand the impacts beyond the MPA of activities, because I think we tend to focus on these sort of boxes of MPAs, but not what are the interactions beyond that line, and can we understand that? Because a bit like Tom's work, where he was looking at areas beyond the MPA and out into the wider inshore waters, clearly closing that wider area is going to have more benefits than just the sort of specific habitat features that they were looking at. I don't know who to address that to, whether it's Jean-Luc or Tom.
Some of the stuff we started working on about a decade ago was site integrity clauses of the Habitats Directive. which allowed for precautionary protection of wider tracts of seabed, or indeed use and activity, to encompass typical species like cuttlefish that sometimes use the habitat and don't. But some are impractical. So cuttlefish migrate huge distances, as I understand it, but they have a breeding population at certain times of year that need reef, seagrass, and other habitats to breed. Right. So, but then the Fish Intel project, you might have heard of it, has looked at tracking in Scillies over a tight network of arrays, acoustically tracking crawfish populations. So that showed the viability of the MPA in relation to a subset of the population of crawfish in that location that showed that it was valued. So I completely agree with you, which is what I'm saying in a roundabout way. We need to understand more of the ecology of those organisms over their life histories to see the relevance of spatial protection as it is at the moment, and expand lists of features perhaps, and recorded individual benefits of sites thereafter.
We bump up quite quickly, don't we, against with uncertainty. And you know what we showed was basically just a snapshot in time. And as Jean-Luc said, yeah, we did track crawfish for 2 years, but actually that threw up as many questions as answers, because then, you know, we see them in a kind of micro scale, but we know that they migrate much greater distances. Because, you know, there seems to be the kind of homers and some movers, and the movers are a much smaller percentage of the population. So when it comes to sort of the kind of management implications, it's a very broad brush approach, isn't it? You kind of feel that you're doing as much as the data is guiding you to, and of course the MCZs were designed to be connected, and again that was based on a really broad brush understanding of, you know, of the primary species and habitats. But you know, we know, and we still know, that it's imperfect, and I think maybe it's a constant desire to improve our understanding. But I feel, you know, it's the best that we can at the moment, and I feel we're a long way away, actually, I feel, from really making sure there's a direct link between our understanding of the whole life history and the connectivity and our MPA network. You know, we're not as far as say the kind of tropical reef ecosystems, which have a much better understanding of that movement.
Thank you both. And thanks, Ed, for the question. Jean-Luc, I've seen that you posted a question as well. Tom, would you like to ask it?
Did I?
Would you want me to read it? So, will the bylaw require IVMS to be placed on vessels coming into the district?
Oh, is that? Yes, it will. But then, you know, of course, IVMS is now something that's been rolled out. Funnily enough, in the 2013 bylaw, it was a requirement when we thought IVMS was about to come in, and 10 years down the line, it really is. And there's very specific requirements in that bylaw for the towed gear vessels, for how they operate, because we recognise that the impacts are potentially very severe, the areas are very small, so that there's very specific requirements in our bylaw in the event, for example, of devices malfunctioning or going down. So we designed it to create zero wiggle room around that, because we recognise the particular threat that those eventualities can pose to us.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to skip the break as we're running a little bit late, but we only have 3 presentations left. So yeah, please stay with us. Robert, do you want to try your presentation again?
Yes, I will try again. Thank you, Carly. Oh, here we go again. Wait a minute. Yeah, screen, and then right. Can you see that, Carly?
No.
Is that working now?
No. I don't know if it's just me. Can anyone else shout out if they see it? No, I see no.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Okay, wait a minute.
We can see it now.
Right.
Perfect.
Hooray. Right. Okay, off we go. I'll try and do this quite quickly. Okay, sorry about the trouble. I've been having a lot of trouble with internet this morning, and it seems to be coming and going. So people's voices as well are breaking up from what I can hear. So I hope you can still hear me okay. This is really a quick talk about trying to make sure that you get as many people on board in supporting MPA, or your particular one, and that every effort is made really to smooth out possible conflicts. I'm going to use the Lundy MPA as an example, which I happen to know best. I act as the secretary of the Lundy MPA advisory group. But some of the examples I'll give here will be very familiar to you. Others perhaps won't. So I hope there'll be something new for various people. So just to quickly go through the history of the Lundy MPA, in 1969, the original proposal to establish a marine reserve was suggested by this particular person, who was a second-year undergraduate at Westfield College in London. Many of you may know him better as Keith Hiscock, and I'm delighted to say he's still very much involved with the management of Lundy. It took 3 years then to actually publish management proposals, and we took that as being the start date for the voluntary marine nature reserve. I'm then going to award little medals here at the end of various entries to indicate that they were actually the first in the country, England and often in the UK. 1986, a statutory marine nature reserve was set up following the Wildlife and Countryside Act in 1981. 1990, we had 2 protected wrecks designated off the east side of the island. 1996, the Marine Reserve was at the same area, was put forward as a special area of conservation, European designation, as a candidate one, and then it took until 2005 for it to actually be recognized. 2003, a no-take zone, very small one, was set up off the east coast of the island. The most important thing about this was that it was done by the fisheries authorities, by the Sea Fisheries Committee at the time. 2010, the Marine Nature Reserve became the first marine conservation zone. All well and good, but sadly we lost the Marine Nature Reserve label. In 2019, the first subtidal scheduled monument appeared at Lundy, which was the wreck of the HMS Montague, 1906. It went down, and then in 2015, we decided that all of these various titles were a bit too much to grapple with. So we then decided to call them all a marine protected area. By 2022, it was then 50 years since the voluntary marine reserve was set up. So we decided to celebrate that and have a marine festival, focused largely on holding a marine bioblitz, but also celebrating the 50 years of the MPA. So the governance structure of the MPA is that we have a 2-body system. This was introduced in 1986. We hold twice yearly meetings, one in the spring, one in the autumn, and they're back to back. Each group has one after the other. The advisory group is made up of all interested parties really in the MPA. The on-island warden, divers, island manager, fishers, NGOs, scientists, sailors, anglers, and reps of various statutory agencies. So quite a large group. And we report to the Island Management Forum, which deals with terrestrial matters as well as marine matters. So they have various management advisors and also decision makers. And feedback is then obtained from the Management Forum back to the advisory group as well. Traditionally, we've been face-to-face meetings, but we're now embarking on trying to do online attendance as well. The tools of management include, as I'm sure for most places, a code of conduct. A zoning scheme was introduced in 1995, which again allowed people to see what was happening or allowed to happen where. This is the latest iteration of that in 2019. To my way of thinking, it's all a bit messy, rather a few gaps and things. But this came about through the IFCA's introduction of new bylaws as well. So that's what we've ended up with at the moment until it gets revamped again. Then both the zoning scheme and the code of conduct are included in a free leaflet. And these three words I feel are very important, which sort of tie in the whole aspect of the MPA. Perhaps one more I would add would be learn as well, but that sounds more like a command than anything else. Tools include having a full-time employed warden on the island, as well as an assistant warden, and they're able to keep eyes and ears open really in the surrounding waters. We have a website, which is part of the Landmark Trust's Lundy website, and that's about to get revamped in the next month or two. And a management plan, the latest iteration being 2017, which again, we're hoping that next year that'll get updated as well. So with regard to support within the MPA, it's important to get buy-in from all users as much as possible. 2 years ago, during the Marine Festival, we managed to get these organizations on board as sponsors, and that allowed us, ka-ching, some money to then do various projects, which was great. But perhaps just as important were the supporters that came in and offered help, either through their expertise or skills, time, whatever. But it was a great group that we managed to pull together various things. So that was much appreciated. Charter boat skippers are extremely important to the MPA. As many as you will know, Lundy is about 20 miles offshore from Ilfracombe, and the charter boats bring out both visitors to the island, snorkelers, and also divers and anglers. So they're a sort of an integral part of the MPA, and we rely on them heavily for also telling us what's going on the water. They are able to keep an eye out. And one incentive for them is to attend a one-day training course on a course drawn up by the Lundy Warden and also the Biosphere, North Devon Biosphere, to an accreditation scheme, effectively, to then allow that vessel to put a sticker on the side of their boat, which indicates they've been on this course, and for which users can then know that the skipper knows what they're doing with regard to wildlife. We have close links with the commercial fishermen that come out to the island. It's mostly potting, and they're not allowed to pot, obviously, in the no-take zone, but elsewhere potting is permitted. But we have a good relationship with the fishermen, I feel. Sports divers as well, are important to let us know what's going on under the water, so they can highlight any things that they think are not doing so well or out of order in some way. People either come across on the charter boats or else they can stay on the island. The island has its own compressor and changing facilities and the like. So that's still very popular to do. We also have close connection with a number of groups and businesses on the mainland who get involved with the advisory group. And members of the public are very important. Lundy relies on boatloads of visitors coming over to the island 3 times a week. And there's various free leaflets for them to pick up. During the festival, we had a bespoke front end of the iNaturalist app designed, which allowed people then who weren't necessarily able to recognize what they were seeing on the shores to take photographs on their phones, and then to have them identified by various experts online. And that worked pretty well. And then also a game that was devised which introduced various species within the MPA to people as a sort of quiz. And I'll have some of those available at the conference in about 5 weeks' time. So if you're interested in that. Reporting also covers incidents that have happened within the no-take zone. The zone, as I say, was set up in 2003 by the fisheries authorities. Excuse me. And then this photograph came to light on the front cover of Sea Angler magazine in the end of 2006, showing an angler with a red bandfish. And the background is very clearly the east coast of Lundy. So, and we know that red bandfish at Lundy are only found within the no-take zone, the muddy gravel sediments there. So this was pretty much a guy being hung by his own petard, so to speak. And we notified the Sea Fisheries Committee at the time. They, in fact, didn't impose a fine or any other kind of penalty, but gave a slap on the wrist to both the skipper and the angler. But I'm sure he was pretty embarrassed by having his picture on the front cover of the magazine. More recently, just last year, in fact, a Belgian trawler was seen sheltering initially off Lundy, but then travelling up and down through the no-take zone with what appeared to be its nets in the water. And we were very pleased that many people who had just come off the Oldenburg ferry mentioned this to the warden at the time. The warden was able to video the boat to get various details of it and report these to the IFCA. It turned out the vessel was a Belgian vessel that was apparently, according to the skipper, washing its nets. This is actually illegal in the MPA as a whole as well. So the boat skipper was apprehended and a fine was imposed. The SAC has a requirement to have its condition reported upon at least once every 6 years. And this is undertaken by Natural England, either using contractors or commonly now by the in-house diving team. They primarily look at the rocky reefs, which is an identified feature, both intertidal and subtidal, but the other features identified are shallow sandbanks and also caves. Grey seals as well are listed as an Annex 2 species, and they are monitored quite closely. The other bit of reporting which is sort of taking place now is satellite monitoring. And as you'll be aware, IFCA vessels under 12 meters now are required by IFCA, to have IVMS on board. And through that, they can check where the vessel is and what activity it's performing. We were also selected as a representative MPA by the MMO, who then contracted Ocean Mine to look at vessel movements through 5 MPAs a couple of years ago as a project to see how effective this might be. Lundy has very little boat traffic really, but they were able to take photographs from the satellite, these black and white images, which were then identified from the land as being these 2 vessels. So it sort of proved a point that it works. You can identify vessels from these satellite images, and in the last couple of years, it's even got more sophisticated as well. So it'll be a very useful backup, I feel, to the IVMS identifications. We welcome university research projects happening. In recent years, we've had a look at the impact of non-native seaweeds within the MPA, and also the occurrence of cetacean species. Most students come from either Exeter or Plymouth, but also we have them from well further afield as well. And then the advisory group reports on what has been reported to it as a publication in the Lundy Field Society's annual report each year. And we're also just about now to put the minutes of all past advisory group meetings online so that they can be accessible to anybody. Ongoing monitoring.
Rob, can I ask you to
Hello?
wrap up? Sorry, we're running a bit out of time.
Can you still hear me?
Yes, would you mind wrapping up soon, please? As we're running out of time.
Yeah. Sorry, ongoing monitoring. We're disappointed that the monitoring isn't funded better at Lundy, there could be the chance to do an awful lot more monitoring. This was looking at Sunset Cup corals, which have been going downhill but appear perhaps to be stabilizing. We have FPOD for a cetacean recording. We're always interested in new techniques. So this is John Slayer with his own 360-degree camera, and these short images can then be used on virtual reality headsets, which we've used. And then a BRUV study that we did a couple of years ago looking at small sharks around the island. Publicity, getting that known, a game that I invented about the happenings that have happened within the MPA over the 50 years, splash-in competitions, a new website coming online fairly soon, and we've also commissioned a film during the Marine Festival about the no-take zone, and that's going to get its first public screening at the Southwest Marine Ecosystems Conference on the 26th of April. So I hope you'll be able to come along and see that at the end of the day. Thank you very much. These are the various highlights that I would then see as being what you would need to do. Build trust, I think, is very important. Mutual respect and cooperation. Thank you. Thanks, Carly.
Thank you very much, Rob. We have Sue next with the Halford Voluntary No Anchor Zone, 25 years of community cooperation. Sue, if you're ready to go, I will share the presentation for you.
If you share your screen, Carly, and then just be ready for the clicking through the slides, because there's a few that I'll go through really fast.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get rid of my screen.
That's fine.
Oh, here we are.
Yes, great. Yeah, Sue, when you're ready, and I'll click through.
Okay, yes, so I'm Sue Scott, Cornwall Council Fallon Halford Estuaries Officer, using S106 Development Levy to protect the habitats there. New slide. So this is a case study about the Halford Marine Conservation's Halford Marine Seagrass Voluntary No Anchor Zone. And this has been going on a long time, as you can see. So we've got a lovely little picture of the eclipse there. That's when it started, 1999. Locals in the area thought the whole river would be inundated with boats wanting to anchor, in particular around Grebe Beach area, where the main seagrass bed was at the time. And they decided to do something about it. New slide. So just really quickly for a little bit of geography. So we're down in southwest Cornwall on the Fallon Halford Estuaries MPA. I've done a little red circle around there to show the Halford, that's that sort of left-hand arm. We're also, are still and were a VMCA. That sort of predated the SAC, and that began really from 1983 when people were concerned about the loss of habitats there. The Halford Marine Conservation Group was formed then, and then we have an advisory section still to this day that has about 40 people, 40 different stakeholders on. If you'd like to move on, please, slide. Thank you. So landward in this north part of the Halford River, you've got 3 really popular beaches. Their beaches are really popular for anchoring off, and unfortunately Grebe Beach has gone up to the top 10 of beaches nationally, according to the Times. So extremely popular for all kinds of sports. The area is protected by a 6-knot speed limit, and this is upheld by the voluntary patrol boat here and members of the Halford user group. We're not a harbour. We have to take care of ourselves. I'd like to move on, please. Okay, so just really quickly, seagrass beds, great for sheltering marine species and biodiversity, and I think everyone knows the rest. You can have this series of slides afterwards if you want to have a look at it. Would you like to move on, please? Okay, so it's really, we do know that they're slow to recover from damage, that matrix of root system, once it's damaged, can be very hard to replace, because then the sand and the gravels and the mud and stuff that it likes to root in disappears. So you've got a picture there, you can see where, and that is just actually a sign buoy. It's not even a mooring or an anchor has damaged the seabed there. And of course, a lot of the Fallon Helford is because people like to be in these sheltered bays. A lot of it is subject to damage. Right, if you'd like to move on again. All right, the iterations. Here we go. This is the nub of it. So at first they had 3 markers, and this was actually the Helford mooring. You know, they were a company, the Helford Mooring Company, that looked after these. And it was actually a very small area. It just surrounded the very edge of the bed. And we found that the chains from anchors would actually still nibble away at the edges. But we used to, and of course, those little white signs were very, very difficult to see. But there was, you know, it was a community thing. And the argument was that they didn't want the place looking like the M4 motorway. So that's how it was in those days. I'd like to move on, please. Okay, so in 2019, the Fallon Helford Estuary Office Mitigation Project started with some more funds, swiftly followed in 2020 by the Life Remedies Project. And we got together and hatched a plan to add more marker buoys and expand the zone. It only took 3 years. There's so much to go through. You need landowner permissions. We had to tell Trinity House. We had to have MMO license, albeit not a full one. So it's incredible, and then of course all the stakeholder engagement to actually bring that bed right out in line with the seagrass bed, and to add. So we've got 5 buoys in there now. What we did do at the time was have some brilliant tech in that we invented between Myla Mooring Services and Helford Marine Conservation. We actually managed to invent a lovely buoy that doesn't marker buoy that doesn't actually impact on the seabed, and these are being used all over the Fallon Helford gradually, and other places as well, like St Mawes. Move on. Lots of publicity and awareness, of course, information boards and cards handed out to vessel users. Move on. Measuring success. Okay, over the years it was very ad hoc. Usually I wrote phone calls to either the coordinator of the Helford group or the moorings officer about people being anchored in the beds. But the Life Remedies Project and Helford Marine Conservation have been collaborating over the last 3 years with some point data, and it started to look really interesting, especially the change in anchoring habits within the river. They're moving away more from that bay and over to the other side of the river. Okay, the seagrass over there, but not to the same extent or the density of the beds over there. And Cornwall Council are also going to be following up with their patterns of recreational use report at the end of the month. At the end of the year. Move on. Okay, so what do VNASs do? They're safer for bathing, they're safer beaches, and this is over and above what they do for the habitat there. Good for marine life and habitats and people too. So VNASs have to be planned really carefully, and you need to look out for unintended consequences. And vessels do need to anchor somewhere. Make sure there are credible alternatives like visitor moorings. Hopefully in future we'll have those on AMS as well as those. The engineering progresses with those. Move on. I think that's the last one. Yay! Thank you for listening, and I hope I was quick enough.
Thanks, Sue. And now we have Abby with National Strategy Supporting Marine Nature Recovery. What can local nature recovery strategies do for our seas? And before we start, I also wanted to say that we're probably going to run a couple of minutes over 12. But if you want to stay, we'll do the Q&A at the end. Yeah. For you, Abby.
Okay, thank you. Gosh, real pleasure to be here. But now I really wish I was speaking about something like humpback whales and not a government strategy. So thank you, everybody, all 43 of you who have stayed on till the end, and I will try and get through this as quick as possible. And it's a real pleasure to be here to represent our nature recovery team. Cornwall Council do have a nature recovery team, which I think is quite extraordinary and amazing. And I support that team with many areas of marine work, but a big part of my work at the moment is this voluntary marine extension to our local nature recovery strategies. So I'm just flagging those strategies and what they can do for our seas today. And actually, I thought, let's wake us all up a bit. I'm quite interested to know who actually has heard of a local nature recovery strategy. So a little virtual hands up, and I can see all your participants. So hands up if you have heard of LNRS or been part of an LNRS. Only 1 at 2 at the moment. So that's really interesting. Okay, we're getting a few rounds of applause for them. That's very nice. It's very motivating for my talk. Okay, so for everybody, to get us on the same page, these local nature recovery strategies are a new system as a result of the Environment Act of they're very much short-term action plans. They're spatial strategies where we can plan, we can map, huge amounts of mapping, and drive action for nature recovery so that we can actually try and reach our goal of 30% of Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly being well managed for nature by 2030. So in England, every region has a relevant authority leading their LNRS, and I'll call them LNRS for the purpose of this talk to make it a little bit easier. And Cornwall Council is the lead for Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. But very, very importantly, LNRSs are all about collaboration and partnership and working with the public and stakeholders and landowners. It's almost like bottom-up approach as we saw many, many years ago with Finding Sanctuary, not a top-down approach. And at the end of the day, these LNRSs should agree these local priorities for nature recovery across our county. They will then map the most valuable existing areas for nature. So that would include, areas like MPAs, but think bigger. And then they map the opportunity mapping to create and improve habitat for nature. They're short term, we're talking 3 to 5 years, and they've got to show results. So really exciting tool. And why do we need them? Well, as we know, don't know why that's not moving on. We've all seen these statistics. This is from the Cornwall State of Nature report. If you haven't seen that, I do recommend you read it. There are some positive statistics as well as the negative statistics, but we know that our government remains largely off track to meet its environmental ambitions on land and at sea. And there's a lot of work needed to be done to meet that collective target of 30 by 30. But we have seen, obviously, there's some statistics there due to MPAs. That's from our draft LNRS in 2020. And obviously, listening to Jean-Luc's talk today and Cheryl's talk today, we know there's been some improvements in that. But we still know that a majority of our MPAs remain poorly managed. And as the Wildlife Trust pointed out, Carly, only 15% of those MPAs are deemed to be in recovery. So yes, LNRS is a tool in itself, is an opportunity, a tool which can sit along lots of other measures like MPAs and local projects for us to reverse that decline and move our marine environment into recovery. But before I go on, and anyone that knows anything about LNRS know this, that what is key is that local nature recovery strategies only extend to the low water mark. They are the planning catchment for that authority. They do not include the marine area, subtidal area. So you must all be thinking, why on earth are you talking about it during this marine conference? But that top italic paragraph there is from the statutory, the government guidance that coastal authorities should consider how to factor in neighbouring marine areas and plans into their strategies. So Cornwall And the Isles of Scilly had that very early agreement that one of our design principles would be to include marine as an integrated priority, even though it's outside of that statutory scope. But we have to reference it clearly as a voluntary marine extension of our LNRS. And although that marine component is not legally binding, it does still hold influence for future marine conservation development. If we ensure a strong and a bold marine thread through our Cornwall and Isles of Scilly LNRS, we can result in brilliant coordination and collaboration and partnerships across our region. We can focus our often stretched efforts and resources on the most effective projects. And it's, we hope perhaps it will pave the way for future revisions of this strategy. As I said, they're short-term strategies. They will be revised every 3 to 10 years, yet to be determined. So future revisions may, create a marine LNRS as a statutory in its own right. So we are including it in our Cornwall and Isles of Scilly strategy. We also know we have to include it because it's really important to people, to our communities and residents in Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, and that's demonstrated through the results of our recent public and strategic surveys, where marine was the second highest mentioned habitat for our region out of nearly 3,000. Here again, marine is non-statutory. It has no set guidelines from government. It also, importantly, does not have the funding and resources. And alongside, our really complex nature of our marine environment, we therefore lack that national consistency, that guidance, that statutory framework, which means that there will be a lack of consistency across the marine extensions of the LNRS across England. We need significant engagement and collaboration with key stakeholders due to the complex government and legal frameworks at sea. And again, due to lack of resource, that sort of level of engagement to create a really meaningful and complete marine LNRS has not been feasible. We all know there is considerable uncertainty about the adequacy of our spatial data in the marine environment, although the Isles of Scilly are obviously nailing it from Tom's talk. And of course, again, I'll say it again, there is no funding and significant lack of resource. So they're big, big challenges. But there are lots of opportunities at the moment. This spidergram that I sort of created on a train one day just shows a lot of the national and regional and local initiatives that are happening right now that have evolved, and I think in many cases demonstrates a commitment from our government to consider the restoration of our seas. And a lot of these initiatives also provide the additional evidence which can support a more comprehensive marine element. So that obviously includes the Natural Capital Assessment Programme, Marine Net Gain, which is being reviewed, and things like highly protected marine areas and the MPA management developments that we've heard about today. In addition to all those national projects, in Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly specifically, we have so many local programmes happening at the moment. It's a really exciting time. We have our Cornwall and Isles of Scilly Marine and Coastal Partnership. We have our Cornwall Coastal Data Hub being developed by Cornwall Wildlife Trust. We have Cornwall being a case study for the Marine and Capital and Ecosystem Assessment, which is fantastic. And we have a suite of other initiatives and programmes in our county, which sort of leading the way, I feel, nationally with marine conservation. And I think we can bring that all together for a valuable and meaningful LNRS. So to conclude, and well done for listening for all this time, we are moving forward with a voluntary marine extension, and we've created the start of our plan. But as it says here on the tin, we are forming our working group to help guide this plan. The working group will help us shortlist those priorities for Cornwall's marine environment, the agreed actions for those priorities, the outcomes, the enablers, via a series of workshops this spring and summer. And everybody across England, coastal authorities, can integrate marine into the strategies instantly, such as area descriptions and maps. But I want to say here, I really highly recommend anyone listening to this talk, whatever region you are in, please engage with your local LNRS. Get involved. There's a lot of public engagement, you know, public webinars, social media, websites. Get involved, help shape and build them if you can. They are, you know, really exciting development and could be a very, very useful tool for nature recovery. But to finish, although they are a good tool and can outline the best opportunities for nature in the short term and recommend the best locations for stuff to happen, it does not stop anyone taking positive action for nature now. We must take action regardless of any strategy to put our coasts and seas back into recovery. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Abby. So this is the end of our talk. I've seen there were a couple of questions in the chat that have been answered, but if our speakers are not in a rush and anyone has got any other questions and they want to put their hand up and ask it, or just put it in the chat, we can stay another couple of minutes. Well, I think everyone maybe is a bit done after 2 hours of talks. But thanks everyone for listening, and thanks a lot to the speakers as well. Those have been really, really good talks. And I will go through the chat and see if there's any questions that have been unanswered and send it to the speakers and send it back to you. And do get in touch with me or the speakers if you have any more questions as well. And thanks, Phil.
Thanks, Carly. Thank you for organising.
Thanks, Carly.
Thanks.
Thank you, Carly.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, Abby.